Good morning, everyone. Uh, Wonderful weekend, yes. Um, Thanks to the Sangha members who did so much work in making the evening at Record Archives. What I keep want to call it Freaky Friday. What's it called? Fickle Friday. Thank you. A freaky fickle Friday. Yeah, it was really a lot of fun, but it was just the effort was so good too. And I thought it was kind of funny because it's this, Record Archive people might not know is this. It's like a warehouse, and it's full of if you want old CDs and all sorts of crazy things there. It's a Rochester institution. It's been there for years, and they have this Fickle Friday where they have a band come in, and so our own band, Chuck Abel's band, came in and played. I think they played there before too. And then someone had the idea, well, let's have Frank talk for 40 minutes. The place is a bar, you understand. And everybody's a little bit lubricated. And the first thing I saw was this big stage you had to get up on top of, and there were I didn't see any stairs. And I had this image of me kind of tripping on this and going pancake down first for starters. Hi. And it's kind of funny because people, were drinking and talking and all of that. But they slowly settled down. But we only went for about 15 minutes because it's that kind of a crowd. If anyone has a karma, someone hooks with them, even in crazy situations. So it was really wonderful. It was a lot of fun. But it also struck me at just how, oh, Andy, it's okay. It's it struck me, how wonderful we are as Americans. We really have this amazingly space that we live in. And sadly, you often don't really start thinking about suffering until there's suffering yourself. I think it's Zen Master Dogen talked about the whip. There are different types of practitioners. There's the person who doesn't do anything, like the horse that doesn't move until the whip actually strikes the horse. So you have some sort of big disaster in your life, and it makes you think about suffering. But then there's the touch of the whip. There are those for whom even just the sort of hint of suffering. So you can see it in someone else, for instance. You see someone else's suffering, and although you're not experiencing it yourself, their suffering, it generates this kind of quest for you. But then finally, there's the shadow of the whip. There are those who are fortunate and realize that even without experiencing anything, without seeing anything in this kind of suffering, they understand that potential is there. It's said, for instance, that the ordinary being, recognizes suffering when it's in their own mind, like it's on their skin, on their body, whatever. But that the bodhisattva actually experiences our unenlightened existence, the dissatisfactory nature, the suffering that's there. And the example they give is that, for the ordinary being, it's like I can't remember what the image is, something stuck on your skin, like a hair. That's why a hair on your skin is how the ordinary being experiences the nature of suffering, our actual situation as unenlightened beings. We don't feel it. It's just a hair lying on the back of your hand. But for the bodhisattva, it's like that hair is stuck in the eye. He or she can't ignore it, can't just deny it. It's a reality. And of course, it actually is the reality of our unenlightened existence. because we live in this situation that the Buddha said the greatest teaching is impermanence. You can have the greatest happiness, but there's always the fear you could lose it. And there's always the knowledge that you are going to lose it because we only have a short time here. So this recognition of suffering is where the Buddha started his teachings. I think about that a lot because it's really true. We all live like we're in a dream. Whatever's going to happen, well, there's time to deal with it. Maybe it won't happen. Whatever. We all act like we're going to live forever. And I think of him, of the efforts that he went through. I mean, here you are just in this, talk about privilege. I mean, the guy's in the ruling caste of India, completely, very intelligent, sensitive. I mean, all the skills, the archery, everything. I mean, he was just like, the shining star of his father's life and of the kingdom. He was going to be the next one. And there he is. He's got a wonderful wife, and she gives birth to their firstborn son. And also try to imagine this in the context of the culture of ancient India, which we know some things about. I mean, the idea of duty, one of the meanings of the word Dharma, said to have 13 different meanings. One of them is obligation, is law. You have this position in your caste, position as a ruler, position as a husband, provider, all these things. And he left that, shortly after the birth of his first child. I mean, it's so completely outrageous. You can only imagine the moral courage that he had. And to do what? To go out to seek wisdom. And he found his greatest teachers of his day, and realized to the same depth that they had, and each one of them asked, "Would you please take over? My students. I'm going to retire." And he said, "No, I haven't come to this question, the answer. What is the cause of suffering?" And so finally, having exhausted all the teachers, the greatest teachings of his day, he set out alone. Now, can you imagine? I mean, without any kind of support. And he undertook this idea of asceticism. He said he came to see that he thought that he could, if he could kill something in himself, if he could kill his attachments, that maybe wisdom would arise. And he did this for, I think, 5 or 6 years. I mean, incredible ascetic practices, not sleeping, standing under waterfalls naked in the wintertime, fasting, extreme fasting, eating a grain of rice a day. You see these statues that actually the Greeks made of the Buddha in his ascetic phase, with the ribs sticking out, and it's just scary to look at. And then he had an experience. He had attracted 5 students who were impressed by his, obviously, sincerity and dedication and aspiration. We're practicing with him, the 5 of them, 6 of them practicing together. And he was doing a ritual bathing in the Narayana River in northern India. And he was so weak from his fasting that he almost drowned. He couldn't get out of the water. And somehow he managed to get outside on the bank. And there he is, kind of exhausted. And a maiden from the local village appears. I think Sujata, I think was her name. Now, we believe that she was a manifestation of the Hindu deities coming at this completely pregnant time. And she had a bowl of they call it rice milk, but they think it was like cream of wheat or something, some sort of liquid kind of cereal. And at that moment, before she arrived, he had this memory of when he had been 13 years old, and his father had a plowing contest, some sort of spring harvest, not harvest. I don't know if it was a harvest or a springtime, but regardless of this agricultural celebration that the kingdom did. And, the boy was watching these men in a plowing contest, plowing over the land. and cutting like earthworms in half and insects arrayed, and then suddenly all these like gulls and birds showing up and feeding on all these insects and invertebrates. And he was so struck by the pervasive nature of suffering. Here you are, even you're eating vegetables, you're not killing anything, but you're still killing everything, and we're living off of that. And he retreated. He was sitting under a rose apple tree away from this event, and his father at one point noticed, where is he? He's supposed to be here, and sent a servant to find him. They found him under this rose apple tree, and he had attained spontaneously, obviously great merit in the past lifetimes, into a state of samadhi. So this word samadhi, the Sanskrit is so helpful to us. I don't know Sanskrit, but sama means same, even. You can think of it as harmonious, completely peaceful, completely undistracted. And DHI, is the seed syllable of the Buddha Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. So he attained to a state that was undistracted. And then when the servant came, they woke him out of that, of course, and he went back. But he remembered it now at this moment of crisis on the banks of the Narayana. And he discovered at that moment the middle way, the way between the complete self-indulgence that he had experienced as a prince and the self-abnegation that he experienced in doing these ascetic practices. He saw that he was trying to kill something in himself, but that wasn't the way to wisdom. It was the middle path between those two extremes. And from that time, his teachings have been called the middle way. It's said that he took his begging bowl and he threw it on the river. And he said, if this be true, show me. And the bowl floated upstream and then submerged. It said it was received by the Nagas in the depths, the guardians of wisdom. So then Sujata appears at that moment, and he eats the rice cream. He eats this, food to nourish himself. He knew what he had to do. And at this point, his 5 ascetics, who were also there, abandoned him. They thought he was giving up the spiritual path because he wasn't doing this ascetic practice anymore, and they just left. He walked, it's like 80 miles or something, to a place where he knew he had to go. A tree, the 4th generation of which still grows there in a place called Bodh Gaya, and sat under that tree. And he said he had found the middle way. He says, though I die and my bones dry up and I blow away, I'm not moving until I've discovered the truth. And in one night, he accomplished that. It said before dawn, it was the light of the planet Venus that struck his eye and resulted in his full awakening. He spent 7 weeks around that tree, in the environs of the tree. It said he spent 7 weeks just gazing at the tree in gratitude. Can you imagine that depth of gratitude? He spent 7 weeks, week by week, doing different things. If you go to Bodh Gaya, they can show you the places where he was, developing his teachings and in communing with the gods, all sorts of fantastic things. But eventually he decided not to teach, because truth is too subtle. Human beings can use anything, even valuable, for their own ends. They can just turn everything upside down. And so he was not going to teach, because he just thought he'd do more harm. And again, what kind of humility is that? But the gods of ancient India, Indra especially, appeared to him and said, no, you have to. For there are those for whom the dust over their eyes is thin and who will benefit. And so he did. It's truly the most remarkable story. His first teachings were given to a honey gatherer who was just traveling through the jungle. And it's like his first teaching person couldn't hear what he was saying. It's just like, welcome to samsara. Eventually, he made it to Varanasi, the suburb of Varanasi, Sarnath, again, another like 100 miles away, and entered this place where ascetics would hang out. And lo and behold, he knew his 5 disciples, previous disciples, were there, and that's what drew him there for his first teaching. And as he entered this compound, you can go there today, there's a huge stupa when you enter in Sarnath. You know, his 5 disciples saw him coming, and they talked to each other and said, "Oh, here comes Siddhartha, you know, the quitter, basically. Look at the loser. We're not going to stand up," even though he's a teacher. And in India, you know, it's like we stand up when the president of the United States comes in the room, no matter what your political suasion is. You know, you're respecting the people of the United States. That kind of thing is even heavier in India. So they agreed not to stand up when he entered their little space. But there was something about him that was so powerful, but again, not in like in a military kind of way. There was something there that they all stood up when he came in, and one of them recognized it and said, "Siddhartha, what has happened to you?" And he said, "You can't call me that way anymore." Basically, because I've realized the truth. And so they sat with him and they meditated for some period of time. And then he gave his first teaching. In that first teaching, you know, the noble truth, the Aryan truth of dissatisfaction, dukkha, suffering, imperfection. This is how things appear to us. And yet it's not the whole story. He went on further to tell you how you get out of that situation. But I'm thinking, you know, what if you were sitting in the jungle somewhere or in Mendon Parks, and suddenly the truth of everything dawns on you? What would you say? And so he started with what? This dissatisfaction, because every single one of us, that's what brings us together. That's what we share. The smallest insect, the greatest conqueror, we all have this sense of dukkha, dissatisfaction. We have to do more to make it better. We have to run away from something to make it better. We can't just rest in ourselves. That doesn't feel good at all. And so immediately, instead of some high philosophical thing that people can agree on or disagree on or whatever, or some sort of political statement, instead, what did he do? He went right to the core of what it means to be a human being, and more than a human being, what the core, our core concern of sentient beings. You know, the Tibetans say you pick up a rock and you see all the ants scurrying around. They're all looking for happiness. This is what we share as human beings. I can go to a country where I don't know the language, I don't know anything about the culture, nothing. And yet immediately there's something there that I share with those people, and something that is completely intimate and fundamental to my human existence. I mean, really, what are we doing all of this for? He went right to the common practical spot. And of course, that's the genius of his teaching. It's beyond words and concepts. And thus he taught for 45 years. So, you know, I thought Friday night at Freaky Friday, what is it? Fickle Friday, thank you. You know, I was thinking I had no idea what I was going to say, because, you know, you don't know the crowd. It is kind of funny when, you know, there have been situations in interfaith things, for instance, where you're kind of like the token Buddhist, because they have to bring somebody in, you know, they can't find the Dalai Lama. You know, these things are all, let's get a Christian, let's get a Jewish guy, let's get a Muslim. And then the Christians can never decide which Christian's going to show up, so they're fighting already in their interfaith way. But, oh, what the hey, let's get a Hindu, let's get a Buddhist too. So sometimes I show up and, you know, they're expecting someone with a shaved head, and they say, "Where's the Buddhist?" And like my fickle joke, I told them, "Well, you get what you pay for." So anyway, there I am. So, and in these situations, you know, you can tell when you're talking to people, whether they're at all into what you're saying. I've had so many experiences in interfaith groups where you're talking, you're selling, but they just ain't buying. So I didn't know what fickle Friday would be like. And I was thinking about what should I talk? And I didn't because it got too much in the weeds. But I thought about beforehand, Nalanda, the Dalai Lama, which everyone recognizes, is teaching what was taught at Nalanda in the 5th century. It hasn't changed. That's where Nagarjuna taught. That's where Naropa was like the president of Nalanda University. It was the first residential college university in the world. 5th century. So this speaks to the great stability. I found some popped up on Facebook yesterday, the National Filmmaking Board of Japan or somebody made a documentary about Koyasan. It's this mountain in community, really a holy mountain in Japan, that was, the emperor gave it to Kukai. Kukai was the founder of Vajrayana Buddhism in Japan. He's a genius. He had gone to China and came to realization, and then came back to Japan, and so impressive the emperor gave him this mountaintop. But I thought to myself, good grief, it's been 1,200 years. And there we were, visiting this place, the shown in the movie, and, we felt right at home. It's like the teachings, it's just incredible in human beings that things can preserve, and something as profound as this stuff. And so now what happens, you have these teachings come to America, our wild, wild West. And yet somehow there's a need. And so there's this groping towards it. How we are so extremely fortunate here is that these teachings that we have, the teachers that we've stumbled into, are complete. And that's really wonderful, because it means different people, different strokes. You don't have to fit into a certain, even spiritual style. When we first founded this place, one of our first members was a professor, I think, at the University of Rochester. I always get RIT and the University of Rochester confused a little bit. And he told me later that he had talked to the founding Lama, and he asked if I could, if may I be, your student? Will you work with me? And the Lama said, sure. And then he said, but I want to tell you something. I'm not doing any of this devotional stuff. I'm not burning any incense. I'm not doing any prostrations. Stuff just doesn't work for me. And the Lama said, that's fine, do this. And he had to practice. So a Tibetan Lama has a quiver, with many, many arrows in it. Technically 84,000. There's one there that will pierce your heart. So this is extremely fortunate, because Lord knows the world needs this. Most of us have grown up in a very unusual historical time as far as peace and prosperity. That's not everywhere. I mean, in the Congo, right now, they have a civil war going on. It's killed 5 million people. We don't even know about it. So we have this tunnel vision, and I'm not criticizing Americans for that, although in some ways we're kind of prone to it because we always had those oceans around us, But what I'm saying is that's a sentient beinghood. Those sparrows hopping around outside my window, picking up crumbs. They're not thinking about what the dolphins are doing. It's just natural. We have limited intelligence. Our nature is unlimited. It is completely vast. It's empty. You can't pin it down. You can't. It's just beyond. But it's also clear. And it's also intelligent. So it's not other than what we're experiencing right now. But it's what we're experiencing right now without these side trips that we take into our ego, which is basically happening moment by moment by moment. And meditation is the process by which we see how our mind is actually functioning, and especially the habituation. We learn and we hear the teachings, and then we analyze it. And is this really true? We think deeply about it. We confront ourselves with it day after day after day, moment after moment after moment. And that gives us the confidence, because it's true, because it's valid, it gives us the confidence to grow accustomed to meditate. And in that, we've had the great fortune here of having these, deeply realized teachers. I think, it makes you feel so humble, because in the midst of whatever arrogance you got going on, and we all have a natural kind of arrogance, we like our team. I always get a kick out of watching, not so much anymore, but these football games on TV, where they have 100,000 people show up and they're paying $100 at least a ticket. And I'm just thinking, like, wow, it's amazing. Garton Rinpoche comes here, we got 75 people show up, and we think we're doing good. But the passion, some of these games now, I guess the new thing is they give people T-shirts when they come, and they get everyone wearing the same T-shirt. Like at Penn State, everyone's wearing a white T-shirt, and I'm thinking, in high school, try to get people to do the same thing. If they choose to, we're all conformist. But if you tell someone you have to wear this T-shirt, ain't nobody going to do it. Especially the snarky boys in the class, but that is what it is. So I'm tremendously humbled, because these two especially great teachers in my own life, I didn't choose them. They showed up. And that's the situation for all of us here. These profound teachings, the ultimate kind of teachings, have shown up in our lives. And I mean, I still can't really spell Drikun Kagyu. Certainly couldn't remember what it meant. It was a meaningless phrase to me. Gretchen and I, when we wanted to have children and realized we couldn't do that on $50 a month at the Zen Center, we moved back to Minneapolis. And, it was kind of a tough time, because you were trying to find a job, and there was a mini kind of recession going on right then. There was a lot of work. And I was just such an odd duck, because I had this excellent education and I had worked at the Smithsonian. And then suddenly there was a 10-year gap in my resume. What were you doing? And this is before the Dalai Lama won the Nobel Peace Prize. So it was like, what the hell were you doing? Well, I tried to make it sound good. I said, I went to a Buddhist center, and I was interested, and I was helping run the programs, but I was interested in meditation, study, and Buddhism. And this job guy, employer, looks at me and says, "Oh, yeah, Buddhism. My wife is into witchcraft." Thank you. What the hell were you doing? I mean, I couldn't explain it to people. So anyhow, we were living in Minneapolis, in downtown, pretty much Minneapolis. And one night I saw, and this is like 1981. It was before the internet. It was before really someone was doing some cutting things with video, right? Video was the hot thing instead of like a regular film movie. And I saw this thing. Someone had this experimental video, they said, going to play in the University of Minnesota in some little dive, in the field of the senses. And I thought, well, what is that? So I went to it because it had a picture, and it turns out it was a picture of the 16th Karmapa. So it was a video that someone took in what turned out to be a Drikung monastery in Ladakh. And here he was, giving an empowerment. Some guy is videotaping the empowerment of the Karmapa in a Drikung monastery. I didn't know any of this, and they didn't even say Drikung, it just said the monastery that 30 years later I learned was Drikung. In the field of the senses, and he was giving an empowerment of Chenresig, of Avalokiteshvara, Kanon, Kuan Yin. And there was something about it, It was just in the field of the senses. And my idea was that somehow spirituality and truth was completely away from the senses. I was practicing the ascetic path. Not really, but in my mind, I thought I was ascetic. But in the field of the senses. And it was this terrible, dark, grainy, they didn't have lights or anything, professional lights. And that there was something still there that was speaking. I had no idea. Because somehow I'd thought that Tibetan Buddhism was just a bunch of mumbo jumbo. Or as Gary Snyder, the Zen poet, said, Tibetan Buddhism appears to be like Mexican Catholicism on LSD. Let me introduce you to Vajrayogini. Her hair is on fire. She's naked. She's dancing, and she's got a pig head coming out of the side of her neck. This is my path to liberation. Well, it's a measure of humility to understand that it really is. So, yeah, extremely fortunate. When Gar Rinpoche came that first time in 1997, we didn't really take a vote so much, but I would guess I was certainly opposed to him coming. And I would guess that I might have been the only one opposed to it because we didn't have the facilities. We didn't have a translator. Who is this guy? It's just amazing the rationalizations that we do. We self-sabotage all the time, and we don't even know that it's self-sabotage because we don't even see our own attachment to our own self. And of course, we can't find the self in that way if we try to look for it, and that's our meditation. You finally see kind of the obstacles we make for ourselves and all the problems. And so therefore, when you have these teachers who you don't have to be there, if your mind is with the Dharma, with the teacher's right there in your heart. You don't have to be in Arizona. Not that going to Arizona can't be a good thing. I don't mean to discourage anyone. But at the same time, you start slowly, the faith, the confidence increases gradually, naturally, just by doing. Just as, someone who's, taking care of goldfish with time, with more experience, they become more confident in what they're doing. In a relationship, you meet someone, it gets more experience you have, the more confident you get in the relationship itself, or, where are the places you can go, where are the places you can't go. So too with the Dharma, we just simply practice it. And the increasing confidence, shraddha in Sanskrit, faith, grows. And so then a teacher can express something that, why don't you do this practice? And you're thinking to yourself, I don't have any connection with that practice, as if you know. The fact that he's there, he or she is there and is giving you this practice is the connection right there. So instead of doing this reactive thing where we're always observing ourselves instead of living our very life, the life that we have, you used to have enough confidence to say, okay, I'll give it a go. This is the wonderful situation that we have here. And I just thought, what a wonderful thing to find ourselves at Fickle Friday. I thought it was a very, very wonderful thing, sort of a step into the community, and whatever people were there or not there, they see you as ordinary people, which is really good, Yeah. As I was walking out, one woman at the bar stopped me and said, she said, thank you for the words that you said. And she said, years ago, there was this event. She was talking about Kala Chakra, 1997. And I had put a bunch of visiting Tibetans in my house. So we had a nice little talk. And that's it. It's so wonderful. It's just so wonderful. Okay, so that's enough about me talking about myself. This is helpful, not maybe. I joke sometimes, because I'm Irish, or have some Irish in me anyway. And Irish, they say, have the gift of gab. It's a blessing, but it's also a curse. So, like I say, you get what you pay for, right? All right. All right. So, yeah, let's stop there today. We'll do our tea break and come back and do some um, Hachi